Krishna is not present in his holy name unless it's chanted with the service mood, and then he descends in his holy name. That's interesting. In other words, I have to chant as a servant of the holy name with a desire to serve, desire to be pure. I see it like the deity. How the deity's there, but how do you see him? So Krishna's in his holy name. So there's two ways of looking at it. One way of looking at it, this way, it's maybe not the way Prabhupada always explains it, is that he's not present in offensive chanting. The other way is he is, you just don't realize it. Like it's, there's truth to both of them. So he manifests more, the more pure the chanting is. Then he manifests completely when pure chanting. So I found in teaching japa, of course, if you're teaching new people, you want to encourage them. But when you teach old-timers, it's like we need to, quote-unquote, get our act together. Otherwise, the problem is we think if you just chant 16 rounds, that's enough. And too many devotees don't think of the quality. So I think it's super important that they understand that not all chanting is the same. And I don't think it's difficult to understand because we all have that experience. Like, one day we feel inspired, one day we don't. And we're chanting the same mantra. And some devotees have this experience. It's kind of funny, and they find it funny themselves, but if they go very deeply, like they've gone into retreat 5, 6, 7 days, 64 rounds, like 2-3 days, talking about the holy name, reflecting, they all have different experiences with chanting, and they'll say things like, is this the same mantra I've been chanting all my life? And they're serious, but it's funny. So many people say that. Is this the same mantra? This doesn't feel like the same mantra. So Krishna's manifesting more in pure chanting, manifesting less, and that's the idea. He's manifesting less. And in offensive chanting, and if it's extremely offensive, then he's not manifesting. But there's qualifier, because Prabhupada said it's not offensive if you make offense if you're trying not to make an offense. He says that what the offense is, you're not trying. So that corresponds with what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said. Offensive chanting is not making the effort to avoid offenses. So it's just the effort. So like Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, there's 3 aspects of inattention. It's laziness, apathy, and distraction. So with apathy and laziness, you don't make an effort. It's like whatever, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. There's no effort. So when you don't make an effort, that's the offensive inattention. But if you make an effort, if you try, even if you're inattentive but you try, it's not considered offensive. And of course, as we know, Prabhupada said, you chant Hare Krishna, Krishna's dancing on your tongue. Yeah, but the question is how much of Krishna is appearing to you, So I like to think that Krishna is there in his holy name, but I also know how I chant will enable me to realize that to a deeper degree or a lesser degree. And if you say the holy name, you become free from sin, but that's a byproduct. It's almost like you could say it's material byproduct. Or Prabhupada said you get piety, but you're getting like the material side of the holy name. Sometimes it's called the shadow of the name, or like we read yesterday, the name becomes polluted. So there's many quotes like that. Bhaktivinoda, that quote when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was talking about offensive chanting, and he said, who could chant 100 rounds a day and not make advancement? And then when somebody was not following their initiation vows and making excuses, like, well, at least I'm chanting. And Prabhupada would say, but that kind of chanting won't help because you're disobeying the order of your guru willfully. It's not accidentally, willfully. And the devotee said, well, won't I make advancement? And Prabhupada said, yeah, maybe in 300 lives, because you're committing offense. Then, but in the Shastras it says if you're making offense, you should chant to overcome the offenses. So that implies by chanting, you'll rectify yourself. But we know not everybody rectifies themselves. You could chant, and not rectify yourself. We're going to talk about that later. So I think there's some qualifiers that help us. Otherwise, we might just think, any way I chant is good. And that, I think, is the problem, at least the way I see it, that I'm trying to help devotees with. Just chant anyway, or, as we said, we see chanting more as a ritual. And so it's an external process. If I do the externals right, it's like a smarta. We can bring in smarta consciousness. I did it right, I pronounced it. I did 16. So the execution of the external is the success. But in bhakti, that's not true. The offering is success. And so Prabhupada said that, but not the mood. Krishna is saying, I would think, but I myself didn't think like this, that it's so clear that bhakti is about offering in love and devotion that we would never think love and devotion and get Krishna's attention by doing something. So I sit my rounds by 6 o'clock, I've got Krishna's mercy. Not if that was offensive rounds, but that thinking is, well, I did it, I pronounced it, I sat straight, didn't talk to anybody, whatever. That's good. I'm not saying it's not good, but the essence is do it with bhakti. So that's kind of what, more or less what Bhakti Siddhanta is saying, that you do your japa, but if there's no bhakti, Krishna is not there. Like, is Krishna in your deity if there's no bhakti? When deities were destroyed in some temples, we didn't know what to think, and Prabhupada said, you can't kill Krishna. They didn't destroy Krishna. Krishna wasn't there. They're not seeing Krishna. And that's not who they killed. So I think for us, it's really important to see japa the way we would see any activity of bhakti, as a devotional service that should be offered with love and affection. Now, the other thing is, this is another problem devotees have, because most of us were trained to chant just do it more externally. This is how to pronounce it, etc., and just hear, just hear, and kind of like don't think, just hear. And then someone rascal like me comes along and says, well, it's more than just hearing. It's like you're offering something. So yes, you should hear, but you should also, as Prabhupada said, hear yourself chanting sincerely. You know that? Have you heard that before? So that's the hearing, but then that's the mood. What's the sincerity? It's like, Krishna, please help me become a pure devotee. That's the sincerity. So many, many devotees have a problem. They say, well, how do I hear and then put devotion into it? And I think it's like driving. It's like, when you're learning to drive, especially if you're learning to drive a stick shift, can you drive a stick shift and flick on the radio and put on the heat? And you can't do all that and talk to the person. You got to focus on one thing. So when I tell devotees, like, do this feeling, like, how do I do feeling? I'm supposed to hear it. It's like you just added something. Like, I want you to drive, and I also want you to turn the heat on. How do you do that? And then after you learn how to drive, for you, it's just one thing: driving, stick shift, brake, radio, heater, turn the rearview mirror. You do that all. While you're having a conversation and eating a pakora, you can do it all. It's no problem. It's just that's what driving is. It's one thing. So if I say, you should be hearing and feeling, praying, it's just one thing. But if we haven't done it, it's like we're learning to drive, and then we see it as three things.
What about 16 rounds completed, extra rounds?
Yeah.
Mood changes. Sometimes I'm doing extra rounds, you're talking to me that, Krishna, how are you doing this here? Moving the tables here. No, this is my extra rounds. So how do we distinguish? And also, that's for normal people, they say that's a standard. Senior devotee is doing that, I can also do that.
Yeah. Okay. A message to all senior devotees and those soon to be seniors. You want to hear a joke from Yadanath? Yadanath was at the mantra retreat, and he's getting older and his hair is gray. So, he's a comedian. He said, my name's Yadanath, and I dyed my hair gray to get the RT, the ghee lamp first. So, if you stay around in this body long enough, your hair will either get gray or fall out or both. And when that happens, you have officially, without ceremony, become a senior devotee, even if you joined yesterday. Because who can discriminate, If you look old, it's an assumption that you've been around a while in bhakti, which will probably be true in many cases. But the point is, when you're a senior, people look at what you do, and they copy it, as you're saying. So, if we look at any problem in any organization, and in our organization, you can definitely look towards the top and say, well, what are they doing? Because, as you know, people are going to do what everyone else does. And I did a few corporate engagements, and I didn't know anything about corporations other than being in ISKCON, so I was trying to figure out, what would be a Christian conscious perspective. So I started studying culture, corporate culture, culture in general. And I read a really good book on it. I forget the name of it, but it was Yad Yada Sharati Shreshtas all throughout the book. He said, whatever you want to imbibe in the culture, you as a leader have to do it. And it has to be, and you have to catch other people doing it, and you have to point it out. Oh, look what he's doing. And so, some people say your children don't listen to what you say, they listen to what you do. And I think that's true everywhere. The devotees, they're going to listen to what we do more than what we say. Because if you say do this and you don't do it, it has no potency. It's actually worse. It's hypocritical, and people like this. This devotee's bogus. He's telling us to do this. One sannyasi who was about as wide as he was tall used to be my size, and he was giving a Bhagavatam class, and it just so happened the verse in the purport was, this is exactly what it said, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was very anxious when he saw his disciples becoming fat. And now he's on the spot. No, he used to be really thin, and he's bigger than anybody in this room when he's giving the class. Now he's a comedian, so he just said no comment, went to the next verse. What could he say, right? So, in answer to your question, this is what I'm about to say sounds a little bit weird, but I'll just explain it, and you can decide what you think. Any repetitive activity you do creates habit. So I have found that I want to be really careful about how I chant japa, because I tend to chant the next day the way I chanted the day before. And I have noticed when I've done the at the post-16 round japa, like, well, now it's post-16, so you can chant any way you want. Well, you don't have to control your mind anymore, just Hare Krishna, And then I find that's how I start chanting the next morning, like distracted, not trying, because that was just like, I prefer to do kirtan if I'm extra, but, Prabhupada said 16 on the beats, unlimited off the beats, but that's just my experience. That however we chant, like that story, this is so funny, Prabhupada was being interviewed, and the man said, what do you get by chanting Hare Krishna? And Prabhupada said something which we all understand, but the man didn't. He said, you get more chanting. I was like, what? He's expecting, you get peace, relief from stress, happiness. What do you get by chanting? More chanting. Because we understand you're getting a taste. But it follows that, what do you get by chanting bad japa? More bad japa. What do you get by chanting good japa? More good japa. That's my experience. So that's why I'd be a little cautious just about, spaced out chanting japa, because, it does create samskaras. Bad japa does create samskaras. And we don't need any more bad japa samskaras. We got enough to work through. So that's something at least to consider. At least that's my experience. I can't, we can't give a Shastra Pramanam, but maybe we could. But you don't want to say, don't chant, don't chant Prabhu, that's bad for you. And that's basically what I'm saying. So,
But they say Kirtaniya Sadahari, right?
yeah.
So Kirtaniya Sadahari, so you're chanting all the time. But
Yeah, okay. So here we're going to talk about this. This is, we might as well go into what we're going to talk about. In the second verse begins with appreciation, but the appreciation turns into lamentation because it's like, I have something so valuable and I don't even take care of it, like that. So there's a lot of remorse. And in the verse, Mahaprabhu says, I don't have attachment, anuraga. I don't have attachment. And Prabhupada, ihajani namnamakari bahudani jasarva shakti tatarpita niyamita smaranena kala etadrishi tava kripa bhagavan namami durdayavam idisham ihajani namraga. I'm so durdayavam that the attachment for chanting hasn't risen. But Prabhupada, in the translation, says, but I commit offenses, and therefore I have no attraction. So it's like, Krishna, you've come in your holy name, like we discussed yesterday. Wow, I'm the most fortunate person. And I commit offenses. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So the second verse is lamentation. Now, what's significant about this? It's remorse. I'm Krishna, I'm really sorry. I feel really bad. So it's an awareness. This is what I'm doing. You're coming in and giving, you're fully present with all your Shakti, and I can be present with you, but I commit offenses, which means I just don't really give my heart to it. So here's something significant in relation to what we're discussing. Have you ever thought about this statement, if you're committing offenses, the cure is just to keep chanting and that, but what if I keep chanting with offenses, how would it cure it? Has any of you ever thought that? Like, let's say you're golfing. Well, the cure for your bad golf swing is to keep swinging.
Isn't it the same Prabhupada also mentioned? If you fall down on the ground, you get hurt, you use the same.
Oh, yeah. So, but go with my example. Yeah, I don't want to deny that example, but I want to nuance it because I think it's important. When I was a little young kid, I played golf, which I grew to think was stupid after a while, but I was really good at it. And I don't know why I was good. I never took a lesson. And I beat when I was like 13, 12, I beat all the adults. But that's a story for another episode in the life of Mahatma Das. But for now, when you take golf lessons, which I've never done, but I've seen people take lessons, and I can never understand, why do you need to take a lesson? Just like me, just pick up the club and hit the ball. It's like, so if I'm giving you a golf lesson and you're hitting the ball off to the left, you're hitting it down, off to the right, way up in the air, and I say, well, just keep practicing. And you keep practicing, hitting the ball left, hitting the ball right. So it'd be like, I need another teacher. It's like, it's been 3 months and I haven't improved. No, someone could say, well, if you keep doing it, you'll figure it out and you'll improve. That could happen, right? So there's that connotation that maybe if I keep chanting, I'll get better. But I discovered, maybe it was Jaiva Dharma Harinam Chintamani, something that solved this dilemma for me, because I thought and had experience that just, like you're saying, just chant off the beads, chant 25, 32 rounds a day. And those 16 off the beads were like horrible. It wasn't like getting better. It was like they're all offensive, inattentive, whatever. So Bhakti Vinod Thakur said, chant with remorse for having committed the offense. So that way, when you're chanting, it's improving because you're remorseful. And then when I read that, I was like, oh, this makes sense. Because I could easily just keep chanting poorly and nothing improves. I mean, it could improve. I could just think, oh, I should improve. I could. But where there's remorse, there's naturally, remorse leads one into improving. So I have a theory. You want to hear it? It's the Mahatma remorse theory. You might study this in university someday. This is what I try to do, and this is what I want to try to do today with all of us. Here's the theory. If I feel bad about having chanted poorly for so many years, or all those rounds, I may have chanted wonderful rounds, but I've also chanted very bad rounds. If I really feel bad about it, in a way that I could commit to the holy name to never chant bad rounds again, like I feel so bad about it that I never would do it again. That can be dramatically beneficial because it would really be hard for you to chant bad rounds. You couldn't let yourself do it because your remorse went so deep. Let me give you an example. This is maybe not the best example, but it will illustrate the point well. Maybe not so appropriate, but because I've taught about marriage, I had to study all aspects of marriage. And I came across somebody who said something very interesting. It said something like 50% of men, I don't say this is true for devotees, I don't think it is, but in general, 50% of men cheat on their wives. So once the man is, he has a spouse at home and he has a spouse in the office. Like that. Spousal, office wives, office spouses, yeah. Now the women are like, okay, I'm going to the office tomorrow to find out. So one marriage counselor said something really interesting. The man cheats, and she's telling the wife, she said, is he remorseful? He goes, he's remorseful. It's just like so devastating to his marriage and his family, and she was ready to leave, and the whole ground underneath him was going to fall apart, and he realizes, this was the stupidest thing I ever did. I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. And in most cases, when that happens, he doesn't do it again because it was so devastating. So the marriage counselor said, if there's a 50% chance that a man will cheat on his wife, and you're convinced that he's remorseful and won't do it, any other man you marry, you got a 50% chance. If you leave this guy and get someone else, you have 50% chance with that guy. So you should stay with him. Isn't that interesting? Of course, some women, they can't because they're just, they can't take it, and that's understandable also. But the point is, it happens very, very often that when a man does that, he becomes so remorseful that he can't do it again. It's impossible. And I think if we can get to that point with Japa, where we develop this connection with Krishna through the holy name, that we feel so bad that we have chanted in neglect, with inattention, and just with not putting any devotion into it, and we've been bored when we chanted, and all the things we said yesterday, Krishna, you're boring, when's this going to be over? And you think about all that, you think, that's horrible, isn't it? And if you can feel it deeply and just feel like, I never want to do that again. And chant to Krishna in remorse. We'll do this in a minute, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, do it, so we can try it. And so one of the things we want to do when we're chanting remorse is try to develop this feeling that Krishna, I never want to do this again. And I wouldn't suggest that we pray, Krishna, I will never do this again, because when everyone prays like that, they know they will, and they feel fake. But at least we can pray, I don't want to do this again. Please help me. No, that's more real for us. And as a teacher of Japa, I have felt if I could get students to a point where I could get them to be completely uncomfortable with bad japa, to be completely aware of bad japa, and completely antagonistic to bad japa, programmed psychologically, physiologically, from head to toe, inside and out, that would be the best thing I could do. Aside from whatever else I teach, if I could do that, then, if I could make it difficult for you to chant bad japa, that would be fantastic. Or if you could make it difficult for yourself, you couldn't do it. So that's what we're going to try to do. Before a lot of you came, we were talking about being aware, when I'm not chanting properly, being aware rather than becoming aware after we finish our rounds, becoming aware at the moment we're doing it. And we know from experience a lot of times we're up in the cloud somewhere and we're not hearing. And, after 8 rounds, we realize that we were up in the clouds. And, you've had that, or after 16 or after 2 years, you realize, oh, I'm not chanting. What we have seen is as the devotee improves in their chanting and as they want to improve in their chanting, their time between bad japa and awareness shrinks. And it can shrink dramatically to the point of like the first few beads, when you go off, you just catch yourself. Did you know, maybe you know this is so cool for running any organization. The symptom of a successful organization is how long it takes to recognize a problem and how long it takes to solve a problem. I was like, wow, by that standard, ISKCON is not doing well. Sometimes it takes us a long time to recognize it, and once we recognize it, we can't figure out how to get it together. So.
But every organization, if you pay attention, they will find the smoke first before the fire comes.
Oh, good.
Before the fire comes,
Yeah.
smoke always comes.
Yeah. So a good organization recognizes it soon, not like after the fires burn. Yes.
So, like you recognize, right? After, so you did japa for 2 hours, and then you realize, this time, was the only 1.5 hour, and I finished it. So you are in your mind, you are thinking that maybe you skipped a while, or then what do you do?
What I do personally, I sometimes have that problem. So if it's an hour and a half and I have 16, I'll just pull 4 beats back and say, I know it takes me 2 hours, and I'll just chant 4 more.
Or more?
Because I know I've just skipped or I missed something. It's too fast. Sometimes I chant 10 minutes, and that's also like, wow, what happened? But I think I forgot to pull some beats down. So, yeah. But isn't it true if you're trying to improve something, you become more aware of what you're doing wrong, as you try to get better at it? So if you're not noticing, if you finish your rounds and it's like you finally notice that they were 16 bad rounds, that's not a good sign. Then you realize, I must not be intent about improving enough because I didn't notice. And so the more intent I become about improving, the more I notice. And if you can come to this point where you notice it quickly and you're internally, it's like, I don't want to chant bad japa. Something like you have a really bad relationship with your husband or wife and you've abused them, they've abused you, and it's just become horrible. You're both broken. The family's broken, and you go into therapy and you heal it, and you're both like, I never want to do this again. And so as soon as it just looks like that's happening, you stop and you catch it. There's no way we're going back there. Wouldn't it be nice to do that with japa? And I think that's so important if we can do that with japa. That we want to improve, we're regretful enough for the mistakes we made in the relationship. Don't just look at it like be remorseful for, I chanted, I was spacing out. No, that's a space out in a relationship. Don't impersonalize it. The more you personalize your bad japa, like this was an offense to the holy name. No, it's an offense to Krishna. He is the holy name. And feel bad about it, the more likely you are to commit out of remorse to never doing that again. Or if you do it, catch it and then change it. What do you think?
Sometimes some devotees say that they are very focused, so they can chant in 1.5 hours.
Yeah, maybe.
So how we cannot
That's possible. It's just when they say I finish my rounds in an hour or 55 minutes, that's not possible. But an hour and a half is,
So if you chant softly in your mind, then it's faster.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
loudly. So what is the ideal thing? Should we chant?
Well, loud or soft or not. Prabhupada said not in the mind unless you're very advanced or very tired, I guess. Well, the Hare Krishna movement is a bit different from traditional Gaudiya Vaishnavism, because traditional Gaudiya Vaishnavas basically chant like this. That's what japa is. That's what it means. Soft chanting. Devotee said, Prabhupada, I can't control my mind when I chant. He said, chant louder. So, but while chanting is kirtan. So when you're doing Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, you're actually doing kirtan. Of course, you're doing kirtan on your beads. It's okay, Prabhupada said it's okay. But Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, that's actually japa. So no hard and fast rules, whatever works. I think we really, I just want to say this in all humility, but I think within Indian communities who are very attentive, I'm saying this is a good quality, they're very attentive to details and doing things right. I think we need to steer away too much from externals. This is how long it should take. This is how loud or soft. Because then you get focused on that, and that becomes like the focus of your japa. Like, how loud am I chanting? How soft? How fast? Instead of the relationship, And I think that's a distraction from what it's all about. So at least we should be careful. It's not that I'm saying, you don't worry about these things, but I think we should be careful because unknowingly, if people are coming and they have that nature, they want to do things perfectly, and Hinduism is very ritualistic. I'm sure when you were a kid, you did a lot of ritual. You didn't know what it meant. It was just like, whatever, we just do it. Grandma told me to do it. Do this, do that. Why are you doing that? I don't know. She does it. I do it. So we have to be conscious of that we're coming from that background. So we don't want to focus too much on. You want to focus on the relationship. This is you and Krishna. So in a lot of these questions, you could answer and say, well, what do you think is best for your relationship with the Holy Name? To chant loud, soft, fast, slow. Whatever you think is best for your relationship. I think that's better because it's a relationship. And as I was saying at the Sunday feast, so many of the problems we have is we don't see it as a relationship. And then if we see it as a process, then like, well, how long should it take? Now, I've had people, I'm not making this up, ask me how long it should take to chant around. And I said, well, people are fast or 5 minutes, people are slow or 10 minutes. And he wrote back, he said, no, I need to know exactly. So 7 minutes and 14 3/4 seconds. That's and I could tell that to him, and he would have accepted it. Like, okay, and he would have had a clock and make sure he was like finishing slower, faster. Seriously. And so when dealing with the hymn, I really understood that the problem with that way of thinking. It's a good way of thinking in some situations because if you need to be precise about what you're doing, it's good to think that way. But when it comes to bhakti, it's too process-oriented. And then when it's process-oriented, you forget the relationship with Krishna. And it's just all about doing the process. And they were like training smartas, right?
Is the same as operation successful?
Yeah, exactly. The operation was a success and the patient died. Yeah.
And also, like I had one time, Dinapatha Prabhu, I think he mentioned, when you're doing the bad japa, your mind is wandering here and there. Just go back 3 beats back again.
Oh yeah,
Pull
start
the
over.
3
Yeah,
beats
yeah,
back
yeah.
again, so the mind will be something like you leave punishment for the mind. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's good. I like that.
Yeah.
I do that often. It's like it's part of remorse. You chant these horrible rounds. You go, I'm not going to pull my counter beads down on a round like that. That was totally bogus. You see where I'm going with this remorse? How much it could help you? You just like Krishna. I can't treat you like that and call myself a devotee. This is not right. So that's where we want to go with remorse. We want to embody it in a relation to Krishna. That I have a relation with you in the holy name, and I can't treat you in the holy name that way. It's wrong, and I'm going to catch myself, and that's going to push me up because I won't allow myself to. I will never treat my wife like that again. I'll never treat my husband like that again. We practically destroyed ourselves. You feel it deeply. I'm so sorry. I'll never do that again. Like that. Holy name. I'm so sorry. I'll never do that again. Yes.
Hare Krishna. Sometimes when we're chanting and we're focusing, before chanting we're building up the mood.
Yes.
Even while chanting, the rounds seem to be going superficially, but the heart or the emotions are rising in the heart. Is that in like not a great
Chanting is going superficially, meaning?
means you're not focused on the names that you're saying,
Yeah.
but you're focused on I think, aspect of Krishna,
Yeah.
which is attracting you.
I think you can be focused on both because the name is the Krishna you're focusing on. So just play around with this idea. So many people ask this question. It's the driving the car question, basically. And I'm praying to Krishna, or I have a certain mood in chanting. But the true Krishna I'm praying to is the Krishna that's coming in the holy name. So I need to hear that name to be present to the Krishna that I'm calling out or I'm meditating on. So it's not like two separate things, but he's the one I'm praying to. So it's like you're praying to the deity's there. And so what if I close the curtain all of a sudden? So it doesn't work. I need the deity. So Krishna is the deity in the holy name that I'm praying to, that I'm meditating on. So think of it that way, and I think it'll make sense. You know, like I'm bringing Krishna here in the name. How do I bring him here? Well, I say the name, but I bring him here in my consciousness, in the presence of my consciousness by hearing. And that hearing then, it brings me into that present moment. Oh, Krishna, you're here. I can say hello to you now. I can talk to you, feel you. That's the Krishna I'm talking to, the one I'm bringing. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna. So that's part of it. And then, you know, offering your prayers to the holy name, through the holy name, that's the other part of the feeling. And so, but they don't have to be separate. It, takes a little getting used to. And it should be natural. It is natural. It just takes maybe a little adjustment from the way we used to chant.
So generally, chanting takes 2 hours. Right now, our Japa session we play 2.5 hours, 3 hours. But the other time, we do all the other offenses. Those offenses are not done by new chanting.
Oh yeah, right. What about that?
So basically, we may blaspheme the devotees
Yeah,
or
right.
whatever. So,
Yeah.
so we are trying to chant attentively, but those things that are done outside the chanting affect the chanting.
Yeah.
When we are doing it.
Definitely. We'll talk more about that in the next verse, the 3rd verse. But I can tell you something that I find extremely important. Because what you're saying is basically, like, if we have to be humble to chant, then I can't criticize devotees. I can't try to draw attention to myself. I can't be fighting, not admitting my mistakes, not listening to people, like all these things that exemplify humility. It is going to affect our chanting. There's no question. So here's what I've seen. It was that point I was making before. I chanted my rounds today. Maybe they were good rounds. So I'm good for the day. It's like, I'm good. Hang up my bead bag, I'm good. Maya can't touch me. Maybe that's true, but a consequence of that may be that I don't think I have to do anything because I chanted my rounds, so I'm good. And so I may not be so humble and so tolerant and so kind and so whatever, some so sense-controlled, samadam, so clean, so whatever, as I chanted my rounds. And so I think the way we can get through that is to understand you have sadhana in the morning, that's sadhana level 1, and you have sadhana level 2 during the day, where you practice being a Vaishnava in the world. So you get to practice, we all get to practice tolerance, like all the time. Definitely, right? So you learn, in sadhana level 1, you learn about tolerance, compassion, sense control. And in sadhana level 2, you get to practice it because you're in the world. And if we see it that way, then we can't think, well, I chanted my rounds, I'm good to go, I can offend anybody and do anything. which is the way many devotees think. Maybe not consciously, but it's how it comes out. But if you think sadhana in the day, sadhana, a lot of you go to work at 7, 8, so my level 2 sadhana starts at 7, 8, whenever. And now, when you're having a problem at work with all these people you think are, unreasonable or whatever, and you're getting all flustered, and you're yelling or whatever and talking behind their back, you don't think anything's wrong with that because they're just karmis and you're at work. And when you realize, no, this is sadhana level 2, then you realize, oh, I'm supposed to respect everybody. Amanina manadena. And everybody includes animals, what to speak of humans. So it changes things. And you're absolutely right. It will affect your japa. And I don't think anyone should think, oh, I respect devotees, but they're not devotees. It doesn't matter. No, that's called jana aparad, offense to people in general. It's not as serious as Vaishnava aparad, but it's still offense. It's offensive. It's not humility. So it's important. I think this is so important because I see this problem. I've seen this in myself. I've seen it in other devotees. It's a real cop-out. It's like I don't have to do, these things are like secondary. I don't have to be humble, tolerant, kind, understanding, whatever, because I have good sadhana, because I chant Hare Krishna and worship my deities. Right? And I chant Hare Krishna and worship my deities, and I offend a lot of people in the day. And what Jiva Goswami said, you have to see Krishna in the heart, everyone's heart, and deal with them that way. So that's super important. I mean, I've given lectures on this for hours, just talking about it, because so many people said, oh, when you go to work, you can't be Krishna conscious at work. It's like it's a write-off. There is no sadhana level 2. It's just there's sadhana level 1, and then there's Maya, and just like whatever happens, happens, because you can't expect to be Krishna conscious because it's a passionate tamasic environment or whatever. You ever feel like that? Yeah, well, so you want to spend your whole day in Tamagun? I don't think it's a good idea. You'd rather spend it in Sattvagun. It's much closer to Krishna, and that's what Krishna wants. Hey, 12th chapter, how do you become dear to Krishna? One who's a friend to all living entities, puts no one in anxiety. He's very dear to me. Wow, I could become dear to Krishna by being nice to people. Who would ever think? Right? So I'm offending Krishna's parts and parcels, and every morning I'm chanting, oh Krishna, please. Krishna's like, get a life. What's up with you? We could do a little play. Get a life, loser, Who are you trying to fool? You think you're fooling me, with your mantras? There's it's important. I don't want to, discourage anybody and say your chanting is like useless because you got in an argument today. But there's a really heavy verse in the Chaitanya Bhagavat where Mahaprabhu talks about offenders. Offenders are different than criticizers. Offenders are ones who are trying to destroy somebody and often making up lies about them. Criticism might just be, you did something wrong, and I just said, this devotee is always doing something wrong. And you could say, you're criticizing. Maybe I am, maybe I didn't have to say it, or maybe I did have to say it because we have to stop him, but it's different from blasphemy. So Mahaprabhu said something so heavy. He said, those who blaspheme devotees, they're like, this devotee is, this, that, and the next thing, just making up stories and so forth. He said, when he chants Hare Krishna, it feels like he's throwing burning cinders of wood on my body. That's what his chanting feels like. When I read that, that was shocking. But that's how Mahaprabhu feels when someone's offending his Vaishnava and they're chanting Hare Krishna. It's pretty sobering, I'm not saying our chanting is like that, but I think it's worth reflecting of, how we are dealing in the day with people. And I think we understand that many people become devotees because of the behavior of devotees. They're attracted to it. But in terms of our personal sadhana, it's really important. And to be a Vaishnava, to be your second level 2 sadhana, to perfect that, all the qualities of a Vaishnava you can practice. And even more difficult than the office is at home, isn't it? Like you want a summary of my marriage workshop in one word, 2 words: be kind. Just be kind. That's pretty hard, isn't it? To be kind all the time to your wife and your kids. That's the private victory precedes personal victory precedes private victory precedes public victory. You do it at home. Like, if you don't do it, like I have a horrible relationship with my wife, and I'm telling you all how to have a good relationship with your wife. First you do it, then talk. So I personally see all these things as challenges because I know I'm supposed to become humble, and Krishna provides me opportunities like 24/7 to become humble, isn't it? If you're married, you have lots of opportunities to be humble and tolerant, right? I was once at a marriage ceremony, there's some sannyasis there, and I said, "You sannyasis, you have it really difficult. I don't know how you can become humble because you don't have a wife." I think it's impossible. The humility we see in you it's artificial. So anyone who's married knows that, and it can be really frustrating and annoying, etc. But if we take it like, oh, this is another victory I have to master in my practice of bhakti. Otherwise, I'm calling myself a devotee and I'm fighting with people. It's just like it doesn't make sense. But because I can fight to get some seva done and get some applause from people who didn't see me fight, then I think I'm a good Vaishnava, right? But that's not what we're trying to create. And I personally don't want to be in a movement that teaches anything other than there's level 2 sadhana, and it's a 24-hour process. Like, what kind of society would that be? Especially down the road, 100 years from now. Just be like, who opened the biggest temple? Everyone's fighting to open the biggest temple or something. I guess that could work. We'll have like 50 temples in Columbus because everyone wants to get the prize or something. Each one will be bigger, taller than the next one. That's the third verse. And it's a very important point, how you're acting in the day is affecting your japa. And I think we've all had that experience. You ever had that experience? You're trying to chant good japa and you can't. It's like, it doesn't matter what you do. You go to the affirmations, you read something, you do a headstand, you jump in a cold shower, you take a walk, whatever you do, it just doesn't work. And you go back and think, what happened yesterday? And a lot of times you'll like, oh, I was really upset with this devotee. Yes?
What if a devotee, a close friend, or just a congregation member comes to you and she shares about the bad things a person has done to that person or offends a devotee, and you have to listen? I know the Shastra says whenever there is blaspheming of a devotee, you should escape or not listen.
Yeah.
But in certain situations, you can't do that. If you're leading a program and someone actually expresses their, vents that this devotee has done this and that, does the person who's listening is chanting also go down?
This is such a good question. As you probably notice, I don't answer questions in standard ways because I think the standard answers are too limited. So what she's saying is right, but there's another side. Question is, what if a devotee is venting to you about another devotee? Don't we get affected? Isn't that an offense to hear it? And the answer is yes, but the problem is we don't want to create an organization where we can't allow people to vent, So it's probably one of the areas we lack in general. We don't. Prabhu, don't do that, you're blaspheming, I can't hear it. If you say anything else, a pie in your face, or I'll throw you off the roof, or I'm leaving, So And that's all based on Shastra. And it's true because I don't want to hear blasphemy because it affects me. But sometimes the devotee needs somebody to listen because they're hurting, right? And if you understand they're hurting, and behind the blasphemy, so-called, or criticism, you hear them crying, and for affection or someone to listen to, then it's easier to listen. Then you can do it as a seva. And I don't think generally you don't get affected like that. If you know this person is they're very disturbed and they're out to get everybody, yeah, don't listen. But if you feel like this person needs somebody to listen, and you can listen to what's really behind all that criticism. My wife says that criticism is just a call. It's a call to be heard. It's a call for help. It's a call for frustration. So if you're hearing the call to help, then it affects you differently. And then you understand it's actually not blasphemy. That's my experience. If I can see that, I don't get affected. I actually feel bad, and I listen to help them. And yeah, sometimes you have to hear some things bad about somebody, but you know it's his issue. It's that person isn't bad. It's how they see it. If you can do it, if you can't, don't. So maybe you can find someone else that could do it. And try to help them. And to further complicate your question, what if they tell you that they've been abused by someone? Then what do you do? Then it's kind of your duty bound to do something. Otherwise, this person will abuse others. So, what do you think?
Would help.
Yeah, if you can.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Doesn't it if somebody is abusing in a very subtle way over the years, somebody,
Mm-hmm.
then how do you, if you cannot even communicate, something truth is coming out, you cannot even communicate, for example, how will the relationships improve? Like the person, if somebody cannot accept the feedback you're giving,
Yeah.
direct feedback, they're
Yeah.
not able to accept it.
Yeah.
They're not strong enough.
Right. What to do then? Yeah. If the person is doing something, you're saying this person is doing something, then they're abusing other people, that they're harming other devotees.
Subtle ways.
Yeah.
Very subtle ways.
And devotees are coming and saying, I'm feeling shamed by this person, or I'm discouraged by this person, or
Taking away responsibilities, or
Oh,
say,
yeah.
for example,
okay, manipulation or something.
manipulation.
Yeah.
Gaslighting.
Well, my dear devotees, the Hare Krishna movement is trying to facilitate this as a place to complain, where, like you say, you can't talk to the person, a place to go to complain so that people can try to help this person understand what they're doing. We have a leadership misconduct office. That would be in the case the person's a leader, and complaints can be given there. And I've been in conversation with a group of devotees who would like to establish complaint systems everywhere in every temple, like there's people you go to. So, that's something for you all to decide. But I'm personally dealing with cases like this, and people have been traumatized actually by this kind of behavior. And you know what traumatized them even more? I mean, we're getting off on other stuff, but you know what traumatized them even more? Nothing was done about it. And the person kept committing abuse to other people, and that traumatized them more. And when you talk to them, they say, if you stop that person, that will be part of my healing. If you follow anything about child abuse, that sometimes someone who's a child abuser and is maybe not convicted to the level that the victim thinks, and they re-traumatized by seeing that person. Well, why is he in the temple? He did this, and they get traumatized by it. So, I mean, I deal with this stuff. So I see it firsthand. So we need systems where if we can't talk to a person, that somebody can talk to them and convey to them what's going on. And the other problem is, if you really want to get, because this is like one of my fields that I deal with, so I know a bit about this. In many, many religious organizations, for you to be a leader, you have to be trained as a pastor, and a pastor understands psychology in relation to theology. So it's not just like your ordinary psychologist, but at least he can recognize, like, if I said something to you, like, I was watching you chant this morning, Prabhu, and you look spaced out, and you get really, really upset, and how you think you're, then I know, okay, he's got some trauma in relation to authority, or being corrected or criticized. So it's like, I know that, and it's like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. It's like immediately, can I do anything for you? I was trying to help. And then kind of, so pastoral counseling, the pastors, the religious leaders, they're trained, they know that. And so if, people come to me and say, oh, he's really sensitive, he always gets upset, and say, oh, but I know, so we can help him. But we're not trained that way. I trained myself. I read 1 million books and attended workshops myself, worked on myself. But in other organizations, they do that. And they have, in other organizations, they have, like, if you're a chaplain, there's complaint forms. People can complain about you and fill out forms. And you have to have a clean record of no complaints or resolve complaints. Otherwise, you lose your chaplaincy. Wow. That's interesting, isn't it? So these are things I'm in discussion with about. It's like, I'm on the Guru Services Committee, and we always talk about, well, how should we train gurus? I'm in discussion right now with this lady who said, every guru, we're doing a seminar on child abuse and what it is and how to recognize it and prevent it. She said, every guru should do that. Like, every leader should do that, but we're not there yet. Because there's no system that says, you have to do this, otherwise turn your danda in. You have to do this, otherwise turn your initiation license in. We don't have that. But of course you can do it locally, but there has to be some system for resolving complaints. You want me to take it one level further? The furthest level I would take it in the perfect ISKCON is that, and I've discussed this with disciples, and maybe someday we'll do this, we'd have a training program geared to heal any kind of emotional, psychological dysfunction that would cause these kinds of problems, where you can't take feedback, or I can't take feedback, where we're having relationship troubles, we can't listen to one another, bad relationships at home. Wouldn't that be cool? Like, then, okay, now you can become part of the congregation. Otherwise, if you don't pass the test, you're just a bad apple. You mess. Have you seen that before? One person just like throws it off. We have a culture, we all get along, and this person's got, issues with everybody and everything, and everyone's bad and wrong, and he's a victim. Then that throws it off. Right? I'm not advertising for initiation, but if someone wants to take initiation from me, they have to take my forgiveness course. They have to take my Japa course. They have to take my course on vows. Now we have a self-care course, because I see all these things are necessary, and when they don't, it creates, there's this one person just going to come and disturb everybody. So that's my dream ISKCON. Everybody, like before they walk through the door, they've been through these programs. They know how to forgive. They know how to listen. They know how to listen to people they disagree with and hear them. And wouldn't that be nice? Because the problem is, like, we think if we just become a devotee, then you'll have emotional intelligence, you'll be empathetic, you'll be able to listen to other people you disagree with. But we bring our human conditioning in, and then we're fighting about something. We can't even listen to one another. And we're devotees, and that's the weirdest thing, because you would think as devotees, we would just be sattvic. But if you don't come sattvic, you don't just become sattvic like that. You need help. And so there's certain kinds of trainings that can, bring you to that level. I've done courses in empathic listening. It's like hard. You just want to tell them could you just shut up? I'll tell you what to do. But that's not empathic listening. I feel like this, and this devotee's so bad, and you're like, oh my God, she's so messed up. But empathic listening is, no, I feel you. It's not easy, right? You can learn, and you learn it's important. One devotee said, we need to empathically listen to Krishna. Like, so Krishna, you're telling in the Bhagavad Gita, you're saying this, you're feeling this. I see the meaning behind it. Wow. So these are things to think about. What I did, I started an organization called Sattva Life, and then I created a code of honor, which was behaviors and rules we all agreed upon that we would guide our interactions. So, like, you can't criticize, you have to talk to the person. That's one of them. Like, yeah, coming on time. I don't know if any of you could be in our company. Coming on time is another one. Just joking. But so what I did, I thought of every single problem I've seen in ISKCON, and could I create a code of honor to avoid each one before they happened? So that's how I came up with it. And then I thought, this is so sattvic. If you say to someone, this is the Columbus Temple, this is our code of honor, this is how we do. If they're very tamasic, they'll look at this and go, forget it, I don't want to be part of this. Because they can't disrupt it, their own agendas can't override it, they can't do anything. They have to be sattvic, they have to, you have to be a servant, you have to be humble. Are you kidding me? That's not fun. I want to be the boss. I want upward mobility. I want to, 10 years, I got big plans here, I want to be the guru, I already got, these people I want to be disciples. I'm giving them my button, So.
But that's the good question. It's kind of starting up 50 years now. 20, 30 years didn't happen. So what we learn in the temple presence meeting is how we will address, as you rightly said, if I say it's a senior devotee, I cannot say anything.
Yeah.
And they find another avenue, otherwise they have to kill them.
You have to go above the senior to, the problem is there should be a system, like it's just, this is just how it goes. And all the seniors know that system exists. So if you go to it, they're not going to get upset with you and say, why did you go? Why didn't you tell me? Said, because I tried and you didn't listen. Otherwise I wouldn't have gone. And that system is there because you didn't listen.
That's in the corporate world, skill level. Corporate level where we work, that is there already.
Yeah.
Should be there in the spiritual organization.
Yeah, definitely. And some good advice I can give you is, don't wait for the organization to do anything, just do it locally. And become whatever you think needs to be done in ISKCON, do it here. And if it works, other people will say, can you show us what you're doing? Because we like your community, we like the vibe, we like what's going on. You don't seem to have the same problems that we have. What are you doing? I think that's the best thing. It's like, it's super inspiring if you have these goals. It's kind of like, okay, we have a temple, we'll build a temple. That's really good. But that is not going to change the culture. You still have to work on it. It could make the culture worse. It could create more competition, who knows? It did for Gaudiya Math, right? Fighting over rooms, right? So everywhere I've gone in the last 10 years, that they've asked me to help them manage, I just said, create a code of honor, get together and say, what are your values? It's all sattvic stuff, but how do you want to do this? What are your values? That would be one value. If someone's in distress, listen, that could be a value. That's just, you can't tell them to shut up. It's part of your values that you listen. If you have a problem and you're a leader, the value is you have to listen to that person and consider what they're saying. All the way up to the guru, you could have it, It's like if you're a guru and you want to visit our temple and anyone has a problem with you, if you want to preach here, you have to listen. That's our culture. Why not? Yes.
Thanks for all the insights. So the ISKCON ethics code of conduct.
Yes.
Talk about personal bias. So oftentimes that's one of the entry to create more problems, like the disturbances.
Yeah.
Society and
prejudice and.
So what is the technique that we can adopt?
Well, this is really interesting because in the course that I would envision, that would be one of the areas. and then understanding your own bias, understanding your own prejudice, understanding your own narratives, understanding the conditionings and that you grew up with, and your likes and dislikes may have nothing to do with reality, but everything to do with your conditioning. That's so important, because once you have that self-understanding, then when you don't like somebody, you say, I know I don't like him because I just, I don't like Gujaratis, or I don't like South Indians, or whatever. My family hated them. Yes? I was in Calcutta once giving a class, and it dawned on me, we were talking about something like this. And I said, wait a minute, you must all have a really difficult time with prejudice. And they're like, hell yeah. Because we're all raised that we're better, right? We're smarter, we're whatever. You can thank your mother for that one, right? So if you recognize it, and then you say, I don't like this person. Oh, I know why. It has nothing to do with them. And it's nothing to do with their whole race. It was how I was pre-programmed. That's important. I mean, look at women's issues in our movement. Are they purely spiritual, or do they have cultural origins, conditioning origins, how we see, And it's obvious for you coming from India. You must see everything like, wow, this is America. This is how they see it. We don't see it that way. And now there's conflict between Indians and Americans. How are you going to resolve that, right? Well, we just see it differently. That's fine. I understand why I see it. I mean, if I were born in India, I'd see it like you. If you were born in America, you'd see it like me. If we recognize that, then we can say, okay, well, what do we do about it now? How do we go forward? Then we would ideally we go forward and say, well, what is the best thing for the community? What's the best thing for us going forward? And we'd figure it out without attachment to our conditioned ideas that women are this or they're not that.
The other thing is also like in corporations, you're forced to act, right? I mean, if you show bias, then obviously you may not have a job, right? But whereas in devotional service, you don't act that way.
Do you have training in your company? Like, what do they call that?
That's what I was about to say. Recently, I was promoted. I was asked to attend 8 management courses. It's called Management Edge. In Mumbai, India, and then Hyderabad, India. So all of us. So 8 courses. One of the courses is building the teams. These are all vice presidents, directors, people will come. Wealth of knowledge covers the world. 30 people select out one. So the bottom line they were saying is leadership edge. Successful companies, what they do are the teams, what they do. Bottom line. Never ever disagree them. Never ever have favoritisms. Treat everybody equal. No excuses. No excuses should not treat gender based or culture based.
Right.
These 3 principles I said. No exclusiveness, should be inclusive. No favoritism, treat everybody equal. When you do that, leaders makes leaders. Otherwise, manager talks about task. Be done, operation successful, patient dead. Task. There is no essence, but they only talk about the things. So that is unsuccessful.
Yeah.
Setting, achieving, should be failed.
Yeah. So this is so interesting because I mean I've studied this so much, and I haven't isolated this problem, but you can see the problem. It's like there are things, even though we're devotees, we need to be trained in. Like we're supposed to see everyone equally. Raise your hand if you see everyone equally. When was the last time you saw everyone equally? Like never, right? We're supposed to feel lower than everyone. When was the last time you felt lower than everyone? Unless you had a nervous breakdown or something. We have the highest philosophy, but okay, we have the highest philosophy. So here's the problem. Because we have the highest philosophy, we assume that we have the highest activity. But it doesn't, unless you translate it. Okay, we see everyone equally. Okay, practically, how would we do that? Like what you're talking about would be an example. Okay, we see everyone equally. How do we practically apply that? So we're not discriminating black, white, American, Indian, African, man, woman, young, old. We're dealing with people based on their qualifications and giving everyone equal opportunity. So if you don't translate equal vision into something practical, how can you say you have equal vision? It's a philosophy. And you just say, yeah, we have equal vision, but you have to say, we have an equal vision philosophy. It doesn't mean we have equal vision until you manifest it. So within our movement, we think because we have the philosophy, everything should fall right. But sometimes it falls right into tamagun. Because we think it's going to fall right, we don't do anything. And it's Kali Yuga, so it just goes down there. But, okay, if we're all equal and we're all humble and this and that, how is that supposed to manifest? So I can evaluate it in myself and in my organization. And if we don't have that, what happens? It's just, what happens? What happens is what happens. It's just us conditioned souls together kind of being who we are, for better or for worse. Isn't it? And where's your culture? You didn't design it, it designed itself, and it's not necessarily exactly the way you want it. So I think the worst possible thing a community can do is not design a culture, because the culture will design itself if you don't design it, and it's not going to exactly be what you want, right? And then you get people with personal agendas who can, work in the system because you don't have a culture to prevent it. Or if you have a culture to prevent it, they can't get in. So either they have to just humble themselves or they'll just go somewhere else. That's why I created the culture. I was really afraid of toxic people ruining my organization, and I didn't want them. And even some of my disciples, I said, no, you can't be part of this. Because they have too many emotional issues and they're not stable.
I think we have to create an environment of psychological safety. Emotional factors.
Yeah. All these things you learn in the corporate world, they've all been time tested. So it works. And so when you learn them, we say, oh yeah, that's Krishna conscious, except we don't see it in the Krishna conscious movement. Yeah. Isn't it? You ever feel like that? Oh, that's just a Krishna, that's right out of Bhagavad Gita, but we're not doing that in ISKCON. It's like, so what I've tried to do as a teacher is take those ideas and go, okay, what does it look like? You have to know what it looks like. Otherwise you think you're doing it because you know the philosophy in your head, so you think you're doing it. But, it's like, I go around and go, Haribo Prabhu, I'm the most fallen. So you think I'm being humble. And then I walk out in the parking lot and criticize everybody. And so you have to know what humility looks like practically. Otherwise you think it looks like this. Prabhu, I just want you to know I'm lower than a woman's stool. You got it? Isn't it? Something like that? And it has nothing to do with actually being humble, but just showing that you're humble in order to get recognized as being the most humble. Yes? Yeah.
No, so my question is, I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to connect the dots, from that question that was started about when somebody's telling you and how you, but I'm trying to connect all the discussions that we're having with Japa.
Yeah. It's totally disconnected. But, no, it's not totally disconnected. It started with Prema Sindhu saying, but your actions in the day can negatively impact your japa. And then we started looking at various actions, and then it got into a more of a managerial meeting. But it happens when I travel. People just want to ask me questions about it. And I only allow the deviation because I think it's really important. And it's one of the things that I love to talk about, and I do talk about, because I've just seen the dark side. And it happens in my own organization. I had people who became leaders. I didn't even appoint them. It's just that somebody has to do something, and a lot of times somebody just does something, and it's like everybody's like, okay, you're the leader because you're not working and you have time, and we're all busy. And division just created two sides. And a leader is someone who brings people together, not divides people. So I was like, oh, okay, it's my fault. Because I didn't train them properly. So I actually have a leadership training, which just had to be in Sattva Guna. And I never trained them. And it's like, okay. So now anyone who's going to be a leader has to take my course. I can't just let them lead because I want them to know these are the metrics. This is what you have to do. And if you can't do this, don't be a leader. And it's just sattvic stuff, like, people, instead of, people are, people, bringing people together. Do your devotees like you? Are you a servant? Do you care about them? You know that book, Eaters, what is it? Leaders lead last. Leaders eat last. Yeah. Do you know, I'll tell you where that came from. It's in the military, it's in the Marines, that the generals would eat last because they were servants of there. But in Gaudiya, here's a story. This is so cool. Can I tell you a story? We'll chant one round. I got my eye on the clock because I want to do this chanting remorse, and we'll get your question. So here's a story you probably never heard of unless you heard it from me, because it's from the Gaudiya Math, and I spy on the Gaudiya Math, so I can bring you Gaudiya Math stories. Never heard in ISKCON. So there was one ISKCON devotee who left ISKCON, and he wanted to join the Gaudiya Math, and he came to Gaudiya Math and said, I want to take sannyas here. And they said, well, you can't just take sannyas just like that. He said, you have to serve here, do menial service. He says, okay, I'll do menial service. And yes, Gaudiya Math, you have sannyasis, 50, 70 years in sannyasis like that. So he puts on a gamsha and he thinks, they're serving up prasadam. He said, I'll do menial service. So he shows up and he says, I'm here to serve. And I said, who are you? He said, I'm Krishna Das. And he says, you can't serve. He says, why not? He said, only the sannyasis serve. He said, why? He said, because prasadam is Radharani's mercy. And mercy is given by the seniors, not by the juniors. Whoa. So that's the Gaudiya Math version of the philosophy to support why leaders eat last. Isn't that nice? Nice mood. So, for example, if you like that mood, you say, that's beautiful, I like that. I think we should do that here. You can create within your code that the seniors serve prasadam. That's like no junior will serve. You won't let anybody say it's only seniors because why do you do that? Because we want to serve. No, we're giving you the mercy. You eat first. We are your servants. I think it's so good if the leaders are the biggest servants. They clean the bathrooms, they clean the pots, because that way, no one with the wrong motive will ever want to be a leader. So I'll become a leader. I got to clean the pots, wash the toilet. That's like the mood in Japa. Like the leaders are like in the yatras. The leaders are cooking and cutting the vegetables. When I saw that, I practically cried. And Gauranga was like cutting vegetables. And when I saw that, I was so happy. I said, this is how you create culture. And the leaders, otherwise the leaders are, get my shoes, polish my toenails, bring me this, bring me that. Bow down. Why didn't you bow down? What's wrong with you? Why didn't you bow down to me? Don't you know who I am? Yeah, you don't want to create that culture. It's not our philosophy. So how to take the philosophy and put it into the culture. If we don't do that, we just get our own conditioning comes out. And you get what you get. And all I can say to you is, good luck. It doesn't work that way. Yes?
Do you also teach a culture course?
I could. I can help create culture. But I could teach you to create it yourself. But here's a really cool thing. Let me explain this to you. This is we were talking about this, but I didn't mention this. You have a Sunday feast and you thank the donors, right? Thank the donors, thank the cooks, right? So then everyone in the audience is thinking, oh, they want donors and cooks because they only thank donors and cooks. What about the person who cleaned the temple before? What about the people who are giving the donations to keep the temple? What about the person who cleaned the bathroom? So what this book was saying is that whatever the leaders emphasize creates the culture. So now you created this culture. It's all about donations because those are the only people that seem to get the prizes and acknowledged. So if you acknowledge one, you have to acknowledge everybody, because then it's like, oh, we appreciate everyone. Otherwise, unknowingly, you're creating a culture that it's all about money, and that's not your purpose. You wanted to honor people, but unknowingly, you're the leader. You set an example. Yes.
So in practical terms, all these concepts can be implemented in the realm of what we interpret from scripture and what we learn from the today's modern incorporate all to this. In the lens of scripture, we interpret this and make this. So these two realms are coming together. So you mentioned about conditioned souls. So that in the ancient Jewish culture, you are in Sabbath day, you're not supposed to work. So they listed 39 rules, what is work. And then you are not supposed to walk more than 1 mile, if that is considered as work. They brought a hut with them, and then they put like 1 mile they walk, they put a tent and consider their home, and then they walk around. So that is the rule. So like that, so we are conditioning also. If the culture is not changing, then it becomes a conditioned soul. So these two, like this, if we teach more culture things, these two realms bring together in the lens of scripture. We interpret this. It's there, but not necessarily like all the answers. Like you say, all the answers cannot be interpreted without this. And OSU has a free course on implicit bias. Q1 Institute of
That's nice. There's a lady who was famous teaching a course in prejudice to children. Yeah, you heard about that? Like she'd get in the class and say, all the people with brown eyes go in the back. All the ones with blue eyes come in. She said, do you know that people with blue eyes are smarter? And then all the people with blue eyes would make fun of the ones in the back. And she'd come the next day, they'd say, okay, all the people with the brown eyes come to the front, the blue eyes. I made a mistake. It's actually the brown eyes that are smarter. And then they would, and then she would tell them, neither of you are smarter. Look what you did. And she'd go on this whole thing about prejudice. You want to take a philosophy and you want to model a culture after that philosophy. That's what I do in my books, Living the Wisdom of Bhakti. It was like, how do you live the wisdom? So your culture should model your philosophy. And if the way you know if you're modeling your philosophy in the culture is somebody comes, you don't have to tell them anything, and they'll understand the whole philosophy just by being around, because they'll see how you're behaving.
The reason Prabhupada the last instruction, what is the final instruction? He said he didn't talk about chanting, hearing, preaching, all this. He said obligation and intelligence.
Yeah.
So you have to put the barriers, put an environment in such a way that
insulate the organization so that it's insulating from anything that can be destructive, and everything that can help it grow maintains itself. And then 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when the next people take over, they'll say, thank you for creating this culture, because it'll still be there. Here's the cool thing in this book on culture I read. This guy said they created culture in some company, and they went back there 10 years later, and it was exactly the same, because they established the culture. It was exactly, the principles were maintained. I thought, that's so beautiful. You imagine, having this very sattvic culture, and every temple you go to, it's the same. That would be beautiful. Yes?
There's actually an organization called Nonviolent Communication.
Yes.
Organization, and you're probably familiar with it.
Yes.
They have a branch here in Columbus.
Interesting.
They used to go, with my husband, we used to do a group session just in somebody's house, and we would take different issues that we would have, and we would pair up with a partner, and we would try to discuss it in a nonviolent, using the techniques of nonviolent communication. And it was a process, and we did this for about a year. It was very helpful.
Yeah, Bear Krishna Maharaj teaches it. Did you know that?
No.
He wrote a book based on it, and he had a nonviolent facilitator come and teach it in their temple. A lot of devotees have done it. It's an empathic listening process, and if you do things like this, you realize that chanting Hare Krishna, it helps you be open to sattvic things like this. It makes it easier. Like in my forgiveness course, it's very easy to teach forgiveness to devotees, because they're very obviously we know we should be forgiving and we're very sattvic. It's more difficult to teach non-devotees. They don't always have a reason to forgive. So, but sometimes you just need those things. You want to chant? Since this is a japa workshop. So this is what we want to try to accomplish. We kind of accomplished 2 verses. We went ahead to the 3rd verse. Now we're going back to the 2nd. But I think it was an important discussion and food for thought. So when we're chanting, we're going to follow Bhaktivinoda Thakur's advice, and he said you should chant in remorse for having chanted bad rounds. So it's kind of like, here's my big chance to like repent for all the bad japa I've ever done. And as I said, the goal is to do it in a way that maybe we can embody deeply within our own psyche and consciousness a strong resistance, internal resistance to chanting bad rings. And a resistance that's such that when we're not chanting well, we just stop and go, alarms, I'm not chanting well, this is not japa, this is offensive to Krishna. It's not just bad japa, it's offensive to Krishna. So let's try to do that, feel the mood, feel all the bad rounds we chanted, feel how it's harmful for the relationship. Krishna, how could I do that to you? I never want to do it again. Please help me, please forgive me, like that. Hare Krishna. And if you want to cry, cry, because we're going to cry anyway. Cry for Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Ram Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, 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 Hare Ram, Hare Ram. Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Ram. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna 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 Hare Ram. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Krishna, I'm lamenting for all the bad rounds I've chanted. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Ram. I think we should end with kirtan. What do you think? Because we didn't start with kirtan.